Jack Thompson was a man who carried the quiet strength of the open plains in every line of his weathered face. His life was simple, yet it had a rhythm that matched the land he loved so dearly. Each morning, he rose before the sun, the cold air of the desert brushing against his face as he stepped outside his small wooden cabin. The smell of sagebrush and dust filled the air, a scent he had grown to recognize as home. With a worn hat pulled low over his eyes and boots that had carried him over countless miles of rugged terrain, Jack began his day. His work was never easy, but it was honest. He tended to his cattle with a care that bordered on affection, checking each animal, making sure they were fed, and that none strayed too far across the wide open lands he watched over. Jack's neighbors in the nearby town respected him for his courage and steady hand. But he never sought attention or praise. He believed in helping quietly, doing what was right because it mattered, not because anyone would see it. The cowboy's reputation for bravery was well known, yet few had seen him face danger directly. Most of the time, his strength was in the way he managed the land, handled disputes fairly, and stood up for those who could not defend themselves. People often said that Jack had the heart of a protector, though he rarely accepted that description himself. To him, life was simple. Care for the land, care for the people, and stay true to one's word. A short ride from Jack's cabin lived Grandmother Maria, an elderly Apache woman whose name carried weight and respect throughout the small town and surrounding lands. She had lived through decades of hardship, yet her spirit remained strong. Her small homestead sat at the edge of a dry creek bed, framed by towering sandstone cliffs that seemed to protect her little house from the winds and storms that swept across the plains. Maria was not just an elder. She was a living repository of history, stories, and traditions. She knew the plants, the animals, and the signs of approaching storms better than anyone else in the area. Children loved to sit by her fire in the evenings, listening to her tales of ancestors, of courage, and lessons hidden within ordinary events. Jack first met Maria many years ago when a young boy had gotten lost while exploring the cliffs. It was Maria who had guided him safely back to town, her knowledge of the land saving his life. Jack had witnessed her wisdom and kindness firsthand, and had since developed a quiet admiration for her. Their friendship was not one of words alone. It was one built on mutual respect. He helped her with chores she could no longer manage alone, and she offered him the kind of wisdom only time and experience could provide. It was a bond that transcended words, one rooted in trust and an understanding that sometimes strength was measured not by force, but by patience and care. Life on the plains was not without danger. The town, though small and seemingly peaceful, had recently been troubled by a group of bandits who roamed the surrounding areas. These men were known for taking what they wanted without concern for the lives they disrupted. They had no regard for the rules that governed honest folk, and their presence cast a shadow over the community. Farmers worried about their livestock. Shopkeepers kept a closer watch on their stores, and elders like Maria became increasingly vulnerable. While the town had law enforcement, it was sparse, and the bandits often moved faster than the law could follow. Jack, aware of the growing threat, had kept an eye on the situation from a distance, understanding that one day, the peace he cherished might be shattered, despite the looming danger. Jack's days were filled with small, meaningful routines. He would often rise early, feed the horses, and ride across the plains, checking on his cattle and making sure fences held strong against the wind. Each day he took the time to notice the subtle changes in the land, a patch of grass that was unusually dry, cloud formation that hinted at rain, or the tracks of animals that had wandered close to his property. He had a quiet respect for the rhythms of nature, understanding that life in these parts demanded attention, patience, and awareness. His work connected him to the land, but it also gave him time to reflect on the community around him. He often thought about Maria and the other elders who lived on the outskirts, knowing that their wisdom was a treasure that needed protection. One morning, as Jack was inspecting a herd near a rocky outcrop, he noticed a figure in the distance walking slowly toward the creek bed where Maria's house stood. He squinted against the bright sunlight and recognized her immediately. Maria carried her walking stick, her steps deliberate and steady. Yet there was a weariness to her movement that made Jack uneasy. He guided his horse closer to get a better look and noticed her pausing, looking toward the cliffs as if listening to something only she could hear. Jack felt a pang of concern. The open plains could be dangerous for anyone alone, and he had long promised himself to watch over Maria whenever possible. He reined in his horse and decided he would ride over to her, not out of obligation, but out of respect and care for someone who had long earned his trust. As he approached, Maria noticed him and offered a gentle smile. "Good morning, Jack," she said, her voice calm and soothing. "The wind feels different today, does it not?" Jack nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It seems to carry a warning. How are you feeling this morning?" Maria sighed softly. Older, perhaps, but still alive. "That counts for something, does it not?" Jack smiled. "It counts for everything. Let me help you with your chores today. The sun will be high soon, and I know you have much to carry." They spent the morning together, Jack helping Maria repair a fence, stack firewood, and tend a small garden that stubbornly grew despite the harsh desert soil. Conversation flowed easily, filled with shared memories, laughter, and the quiet comfort of companionship. Jack always felt a sense of peace in Maria's presence, as if the world slowed down just enough to make each moment meaningful. For Maria, Jack's help was more than physical assistance. It was a reassurance that someone cared, that her life and knowledge were respected as noon approached. Jack saddled his horse and prepared to ride back to his own property. Maria placed a hand on his arm. "Thank you, Jack. You have always been kind, even when the world seemed cruel." Jack tipped his hat. "It is nothing, ma'am. I just do what I can. You have done much for this land and its people. I only return the favor." He rode back across the plains, the wind tugging at his coat and the sun casting long shadows behind him. In that moment, he felt the delicate balance of life on the open land, the beauty, the danger, and the responsibility that came with knowing others depended on him. Jack understood that his quiet life, though filled with simple tasks, held moments of true significance. The people he protected, the land he nurtured, and the trust he earned were treasures far greater than gold or fame. As he rode toward his cabin, he could not shake the feeling that something was changing. The wind carried a faint sound of movement, and the land, usually predictable, seemed restless. Jack knew the bandits had been growing bolder, and he had a sense that soon his calm, measured days might face a challenge unlike any he had encountered before. Yet even with that unease, he felt ready. The bond he had built with Maria and the others, the courage he carried quietly in his heart, and the knowledge that he acted for the right reasons gave him strength. Whatever lay ahead, Jack Thompson was a man prepared to face it, not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do, and so. The plains stretched endlessly before him. Sun blazing, wind whispering, and Jack rode on, unaware that the quiet life he cherished was about to demand the bravest act of his life. Days passed quietly on the plains, but Jack Thompson could feel a change in the air. The wind, usually soft and comforting, carried a restless energy that made the tall grass sway unnaturally. Birds that usually sang from the cliffs seemed quieter, their calls tentative. Jack had learned long ago that the land spoke in ways most people ignored. Every rustle of leaves, every shift in the clouds, every sudden silence could be a warning. And now, something felt off. He rode out early one morning to check on his cattle. Moving slowly along the winding trails that led through the desert plains, his eyes scanned every shadow, every movement, and every glint of sunlight that could indicate danger. Jack had always been careful, but the past few weeks had left him uneasy. Stories of bandits had grown louder in town. Farmers whispered about missing livestock. Merchants spoke of travelers robbed along the roads, and a sense of fear settled like dust over the community. Yet Jack refused to let fear control him. He believed in facing threats with caution and intelligence, not panic. As he rode near the cliffs overlooking Grandmother Maria's homestead, Jack noticed something unusual. The small trail that led to her house had fresh tracks hoof prints, not from his own horse, and footprints that didn't match any local family. His stomach tightened. The tracks suggested that someone had passed by recently, and he immediately thought of the bandits he had heard about. He slowed his horse and studied the trail carefully. The prints were large, hurried, and careless, as if the people who left them had not expected anyone to be watching. Jack's mind raced. He knew that Maria, though wise and capable in many ways, was vulnerable to threats from outside. Her age and limited mobility made it impossible for her to defend herself against determined criminals. Jack felt a surge of determination. He could not allow anything to happen to her, yet he also knew the danger he faced. The bandits were not just thieves. They were men willing to use violence without hesitation. A confrontation could cost him his life, but Jack had never believed courage was measured by safety alone. True bravery, he thought, was about standing up for those who could not protect themselves, even at great personal risk. That evening, Jack rode closer to Maria's homestead. He wanted to be nearby without alarming her, to understand the situation before taking any direct action. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, he saw her figure moving slowly across the yard. She was gathering firewood, unaware of the potential danger approaching her home. Jack's heart ached to see her work so hard, yet he admired her resilience. Maria had faced more challenges in her life than most people could imagine, yet she carried herself with quiet dignity and a deep sense of calm. Jack dismounted and tied his horse behind a rock, observing from a distance. The fading light made it harder to see, but he could make out the shadows of people moving near the edge of the creek bed. They were unfamiliar figures, cloaked in dark clothing, and their movements were furtive. Jack recognized them immediately. Bandits. They were examining the area, probably planning to strike at Maria's homestead the next morning. Jack's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic would serve no purpose. He needed a plan. He studied the land around Maria's home. There were natural barriers, the cliffs, the creek bed, and patches of thick brush that could provide cover. Jack realized he could use these features to his advantage. He thought about the best way to protect Maria without putting her directly in harm's way. A direct fight might be unavoidable, but if he could catch the bandits by surprise or outsmart them, he could reduce the risk for both of them. Every decision mattered, and Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. That night, he returned to his cabin, moving silently to avoid detection. By the time he reached his door, the sky was filled with stars, and the desert was bathed in silver moonlight. Jack could not sleep. His mind was alive with strategy and concern. He gathered ropes, lanterns, and a few provisions, thinking through how he could respond if the bandits attempted to enter Maria's home. He made mental notes of every potential escape route, every spot that could hide an ambush, and every place where he could keep watch without being seen. The hours passed slowly, yet Jack's resolve only grew stronger. Morning arrived with a pale, cautious light. Jack saddled his horse once more and rode toward Maria's homestead, choosing a route that would allow him to observe without revealing his presence. He found a hidden spot behind a large boulder, overlooking the yard and the small garden where Maria had planted her vegetables. From this vantage point, he could see every entrance and path, and he could spot anyone approaching from a distance. Jack's heart pounded, but he stayed focused. The bandits had not yet arrived, but their tracks were fresh enough to suggest that their plan was already underway. He spotted Maria moving slowly, collecting water from a barrel. She hummed softly, unaware of the danger. Jack's chest tightened. He knew she trusted the land, trusted the quiet rhythms of life. But in moments like this, that trust could be dangerous. Jack vowed to himself that he would not allow any harm to come to her. He thought about the years of stories Maria had shared with him, the lessons of courage, the importance of kindness, and the value of community. All of that wisdom was precious, and it deserved protection. By mid-morning, the bandits appeared. They moved cautiously at first, stopping to examine the surroundings, muttering to one another in harsh whispers. Jack watched their every move, noting the weapons they carried and the way they communicated. He could tell that these men were experienced. But he also saw signs of carelessness, a momentary pause too long, a glance in the wrong direction. Jack knew that even the smallest mistakes could be exploited. He remained hidden, patient, waiting for the right moment to act, As the bandits drew closer to Maria's homestead, Jack realized that a confrontation was inevitable. There would be no turning back. He took a deep breath, recalling the lessons of his life on the plains. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. He positioned himself where he could intervene quickly, and he made a silent promise to protect Maria at all costs. The thought of failure was unbearable, yet Jack knew that panic or hesitation would be far worse. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Jack's eyes never left the approaching figures. Every rustle of the wind, every shift of sunlight across the rocks was a signal. He could almost hear Maria's calm humming as a counterpoint to the tension that gripped the land. It reminded him why he was doing this, not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. His life, his safety, all of it was secondary to the protection of someone who had given him so much wisdom and kindness. Then, just as the bandits reached the edge of the yard, Jack made his move. He called out firmly, his voice echoing across the desert. The sudden sound startled the intruders, and Jack used the moment to take control of the situation. He shouted warnings, positioned himself between the bandits and Maria, and relied on his knowledge of the land to anticipate their movements. His courage and quick thinking turned what could have been a disaster into a carefully controlled standoff. The bandits, caught off guard and unsure of the terrain, hesitated. Jack could see the uncertainty in their eyes, and he pressed the advantage. He used clever tactics, shifting his position, creating distractions with thrown stones, and shouting commands to make it seem as though he had reinforcements nearby. The bandits, unprepared for the resilience and intelligence they faced, began to retreat slowly. Jack kept his focus, ensuring they could not return while simultaneously keeping Maria safe and unharmed. By the afternoon, immediate danger had passed. The bandits had vanished into the hills, leaving no trace of their presence other than the tracks Jack had studied so carefully. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief, but did not relax fully. He approached Maria's homestead, careful to reassure her and explain the situation without causing fear. Maria listened calmly, her eyes reflecting both concern and pride. "You are brave, Jack," she said softly. "You risked yourself for me, and that is a gift no one can repay." Jack shook his head. "It was not a choice, ma'am. I could not let anything happen to you. We all have responsibilities, and this is mine." The day ended with a sense of cautious peace. Jack stayed close to Maria, helping with chores and ensuring her home was secure. Though exhausted, he felt a deep satisfaction. The danger had passed, and he had fulfilled the promise he made to himself long ago, to protect those who could not defend themselves. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. The plains were vast, the bandits cunning, and life rarely stayed calm for long. Still, Jack's courage, foresight, and unwavering commitment had turned a potential tragedy into a story of quiet heroism. As the sun set, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, Jack sat on a rock near Maria's home, watching the desert stretch endlessly before him. He felt a profound connection to the land, to the people who relied on him, and to the values that guided his life. The threat of danger had sharpened his senses and tested his resolve, but it had also reminded him of why he lived the way he did. Courage, he realized, was not measured by avoiding risk, but by facing it with care, thoughtfulness, and unwavering determination. The morning arrived slowly, with the sun creeping over the horizon, spilling golden light across the desert plains. Jack Thompson had spent a restless night near Grandmother Maria's homestead, his mind sharp with plans and strategies. He had prepared himself for what he knew was inevitable. The bandits would return. The quiet peace of the early morning only heightened the tension, the silence heavy with the promise of action. Jack checked his horse, ensuring it was ready for a swift ride if needed, and adjusted the rope and lanterns he had prepared the night before. Every detail mattered. He understood that the difference between success and disaster could be the smallest oversight. Maria, awake and alert despite her age, moved about her home with calm efficiency. She seemed almost at peace, though Jack knew better. She had lived a long life and understood danger in ways few others did. She respected the land and its rhythms, and she trusted Jack to act with wisdom and courage. Seeing her move quietly through the yard, gathering water and tending her garden, filled Jack with determination. He would protect her, no matter the cost. He knew that her safety was more important than his own comfort or security. By mid-morning, Jack spotted movement on the horizon. The bandits had returned, larger in number and more determined than before. They approached cautiously, trying to remain unnoticed, but the open plains gave them little cover. Jack could see their weapons glinting in the sunlight, and the tension in their movements was palpable. They were skilled and experienced, but Jack had spent years learning the land, the trails, and the hidden advantages that nature provided. He knew these plains as well as he knew the lines of his own hands, and now he would use that knowledge to protect Maria. Jack moved silently to a position that gave him a clear view of the approach while keeping him hidden behind a ridge of rocks. From this vantage point, he could see the entire area around Maria's home. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. He had faced danger before, but this was different. These men were not merely seeking to steal. They were willing to hurt anyone who stood in their way. Jack's heart pounded, but he focused on calm thinking, careful planning, and the promise he had made to himself to keep Maria safe. The first bandit crested the ridge near Maria's homestead. Glancing around as if to make sure the area was clear, Jack waited until he had a clear line of sight, then made a small noise just enough to catch the bandit's attention. The man paused, scanning the rocks in the yard, sensing that he was not alone. Jack's plan was to scare them, to make them hesitate long enough to reconsider their attack. Slowly, the remaining bandits approached, unaware that Jack had studied their every move. He used shadows, rocks, and the terrain to his advantage, making it seem as though there were more defenders than just himself. As the bandits entered the yard, Jack stepped into view, his stance confident and deliberate. "Stop right there," he called, his voice strong and commanding across the open space. The bandits froze, startled by the sudden appearance. Jack had positioned himself between them and Maria's home, his eyes fixed firmly on the intruders. They hesitated, unsure of how many others might be watching or what traps awaited them. Jack's knowledge of their movements gave him an edge. He could predict their next steps and react accordingly. The confrontation began with careful precision. Jack did not rush, but he remained ready for anything. When one of the bandits tried to circle toward the house, Jack threw a rock, hitting a metal bucket near the porch. The loud clatter echoed, startling the men and drawing their attention. Another bandit lunged toward Maria's gate, but Jack shouted, forcing him to pause. He moved quickly, using his understanding of the terrain to block any path toward the homestead. The bandits realized they were not dealing with an ordinary man. This cowboy knew the land, he knew their tactics, and he was ready to act decisively. Jack's calm confidence seemed to unnerve the bandits. They whispered to one another, uncertain of the best way to proceed. Jack seized the opportunity, calling out instructions that implied reinforcements were near. He created the illusion of a larger defense, using clever movements, shadows, and sounds to give the impression that the entire area was watched. The bandits began to hesitate, their confidence waning as they tried to reassess the situation. Jack's courage and strategy worked like a shield. Every step he took, every call he made, reinforced the illusion of overwhelming protection. Maria watched from the porch, her eyes wide but calm. She had faith in Jack's abilities and knew that he would protect her. Yet even as she watched, her heart raced with concern. Jack was outnumbered, and though he was skilled and brave, there was always a risk. She whispered a silent prayer, trusting in his courage and experience. Her presence reminded Jack of what he was fighting for. Not pride, not recognition, but the safety of someone who had given him wisdom, kindness, and trust. The stakes were higher than mere life or property. They were about honor, duty, and humanity. As the standoff continued, Jack noticed one of the bandits attempting to flank him, hoping to catch him off guard. Anticipating this move, he shifted his position silently, using a boulder to block the man's path. The bandit froze, unsure of how to proceed. Jack called out again, his voice firm and unwavering. "Turn back now. You will find nothing here but trouble for yourselves." The words carried authority. reinforced by Jack's confident stance and the knowledge of the land that made escape difficult for the intruders. The bandits began to retreat slowly. Realizing that they had underestimated the cowboys' skill and the terrain's advantages, Jack did not chase them. He knew that pushing too far could provoke a desperate attack. Instead, he maintained a strong presence, ensuring their departure while keeping Maria safe. Each step of their retreat was monitored carefully, his eyes never leaving their movements. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes, the bandits disappeared into the hills. Leaving the homestead untouched and Maria unharmed, Jack allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but did not relax fully. He approached Maria, offering reassurance and checking to make sure she was unharmed. "It's over for now," he said, his voice steady. "They're gone, and you're safe." Maria nodded, a small smile crossing her face. "Thank you, Jack. You have risked so much to protect me. I cannot express how grateful I am." Jack shook his head. "It was my duty. I could not let anyone harm you. That is all that matters." The afternoon passed, with Jack helping Maria secure her home further. They reinforced the fences, moved valuable items out of sight, and ensured that every possible entrance was safe. Though exhausted, Jack remained vigilant. The encounter had tested his courage, intelligence, and endurance. But it had also reinforced the importance of preparation, careful observation, and trust in one's instincts. Maria, ever wise and calm, offered advice and guidance as he worked, demonstrating that courage was not only physical, but also mental and strategic. By evening, the immediate threat had passed, and the homestead was quiet once more. Jack sat on a rock near the garden, taking in the view of the vast plains stretching endlessly before him. The wind was softer now, carrying the scent of sage and earth, a reminder of the peace he had fought to preserve. He reflected on the events of the day, thinking about the risks he had taken and the careful planning that had allowed him to succeed. Courage, he realized, was about more than facing danger. It was about understanding it, preparing for it, and acting with purpose and care. Maria joined him quietly, sitting on a low stone beside him. "You have a brave heart, Jack," she said softly. "Not many would face danger as you have. You acted not for yourself, but for others. That is true courage." Jack smiled faintly, humbled by her words. "I only did what was right," he replied. "You have given me wisdom, guidance, and trust. Protecting you is the least I can do." They sat together in silence for a moment, watching the sun dip behind the cliffs, casting long shadows across the land. The day had been difficult, yet it had strengthened their bond and reinforced the values they both held dear. As night fell, Jack remained close to the homestead, ensuring that Maria was safe and comfortable. The stars appeared one by one, sparkling like tiny lanterns over the desert. The plains, vast and endless, held a sense of calm once more, though Jack knew that life on the frontier was never truly free of danger. Yet, for now, the immediate threat had passed, and he had fulfilled his promise. His courage, intelligence, and determination had protected someone who could not protect herself, and in doing so, he had acted with honor and integrity. The events of the day would not be forgotten. Jack knew that the bond he shared with Maria, the trust she placed in him, and the successful defense of her home were treasures far greater than any material reward. He had risked his life, faced uncertainty, and acted with care, and the result was the safety of someone he deeply respected. As he watched the stars twinkle above, Jack understood that true bravery was not measured by recognition or praise, but by the selfless acts that preserved life, dignity, and trust. And as the desert night enveloped the homestead in quiet peace, Jack Thompson felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had faced danger, relied on his skills and instincts, and protected someone whose life mattered. The morning after the confrontation arrived with a soft golden light stretching across the plains. Jack Thompson had spent the night near Grandmother Maria's homestead, resting only briefly in the cool desert air. His body ached from the day before, his arms sore from action. His legs stiffed from riding and standing, but a quiet satisfaction filled his heart. He had faced danger and come through it successfully. More importantly, Maria was safe, and her home remained untouched. As the sun rose, painting the landscape in warm colors, Jack reflected on the events that had transpired. Though his body bore the marks of tension and exertion, his spirit was light. Buoyed by the knowledge that he had done what was right, Maria was already awake, moving gracefully through the yard despite her age. She greeted Jack with a small, warm smile, her eyes carrying a depth of gratitude that words alone could not convey. "Good morning, Jack," she said softly. "You have done much for me, more than I can ever repay." Jack tipped his hat, brushing the dust from his coat. "It was nothing, ma'am. You are safe, and that is what matters most." Though he said it simply, the weight of his actions hung quietly between them. He did not seek recognition, but Maria's eyes conveyed a thankfulness that touched him deeply. After sharing a modest breakfast, they began the task of repairing the small damages the previous day's tension had caused. Fences were mended, gates reinforced, and small gaps in the garden carefully patched. Jack worked alongside Maria, not just out of duty, but out of a deep respect for her and the life she had cultivated in this harsh land. Maria, in turn, offered guidance and advice, her movements precise despite her years. She had lived through many challenges, yet she never let the weight of hardship dim her spirit. Jack often thought of her as a living symbol of resilience and wisdom. Her presence reminded him that courage was not only about bold actions, but also about enduring life with dignity and grace. As the morning progressed, a sense of quiet relief settled over the homestead. The bandits were gone, at least for now, and the danger had passed. Jack and Maria worked in companionable silence, the rhythm of their tasks punctuated by the occasional remark or laugh. Jack noticed how the garden seemed to thrive despite the desert's harshness, a reflection of Maria's careful attention and enduring spirit. It reminded him why he had chosen to stand in her defense. This land, these people, and the trust they placed in him were more precious than anything he could carry or own. Protecting them was an honor, not a burden by midday. The town's neighbors had begun to hear rumors of the previous day's events. Though Jack had acted quietly, news of his bravery spread slowly through whispers and stories shared by those who had witnessed parts of the confrontation or had heard accounts from others. Some came to check on Maria, expressing relief and admiration for Jack's courage. Maria greeted them with calm dignity, deflecting praise and focusing instead on the continued care of her home. Jack, as usual, avoided attention, preferring to remain in the background. He understood that true bravery did not require an audience. It required action, integrity, and a commitment to protecting others, regardless of recognition. As afternoon approached, Maria invited Jack to sit with her beneath the shade of a large mesquite tree. The sun cast a warm glow across the yard, and the wind carried the soft scent of sage and earth. Maria reached into a small pouch and pulled out a carefully crafted objected token of gratitude and respect. It was a small carving, shaped from a piece of local wood, polished smooth by years of handling. The carving depicted a mountain and a river, symbols of endurance and life. And Maria's eyes sparkled as she handed it to Jack. "This is for you," she said quietly. "A symbol of gratitude and a reminder of courage. You risked much to protect me, and that bravery will never be forgotten." Jack held the token carefully, feeling the weight of its meaning. It was more than a gift. It was a recognition of his values, his courage, and the bond he shared with Maria. Jack felt a deep sense of fulfillment, realizing that the true reward of his actions was not material, but emotional and spiritual. He had faced danger and acted with integrity, preserving the safety and dignity of someone he respected deeply. The token was a symbol, but the real reward was the knowledge that he had done what was right. Maria's trust, the gratitude of the community, and the satisfaction of knowing he had acted honorably were treasures that no gold or coin could match. In the days that followed, life at the homestead settled into a calm rhythm once more. Jack continued to help Maria with chores, repairs, and errands, always mindful of her comfort and safety. Though the immediate threat had passed, he remained vigilant. Understanding that life on the plains could change suddenly and without warning, the experience had sharpened his awareness, deepened his courage, and strengthened his resolve to protect those who could not defend themselves. Each day brought a new lesson in patience, care, and the quiet power of observation. The community, too, responded with admiration and respect. Neighbors came by, offering small gestures of thanks, sharing stories of Jack's bravery, and ensuring that Maria's home remained safe and supported. Jack, humble as ever, deflected praise, insisting that he had only done what any responsible person would do. Yet the community knew better. His actions were extraordinary, not because of force or recklessness, but because of careful planning, courage, and a deep sense of moral responsibility. They saw in him a protector, a man who could be trusted in moments of danger, and a symbol of the values they cherished in a world that often seemed uncertain and harsh. Jack and Maria often sat together in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the cliffs and listening to the soft whispers of the desert wind. They spoke of life, of courage, and of the lessons the land had taught them both. Maria shared stories of her ancestors, tales of resilience, honor, and wisdom that had guided her through many challenges. Jack listened carefully, appreciating the depth of her experience and the quiet strength that had carried her through decades of life on the plains. Their bond, forged through trust and mutual respect, had become stronger than ever. It was a relationship built not on words alone, but on actions, shared understanding, and the unspoken knowledge that each could rely on the other in times of need. One evening, as stars began to dot the sky, Jack reflected on the events of the past days. The confrontation with the bandits had tested him in ways he had never imagined. Yet he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to the land and people he cared for. He understood that courage was not just about facing immediate danger, but about living with integrity, preparing for challenges, and acting with compassion and intelligence. Protecting Maria had reminded him of the value of selfless action, the importance of foresight, and the enduring power of trust between people. Maria, sitting beside him quietly, handed Jack a cup of tea. The warmth of the drink a simple comfort after the long days of tension and vigilance. "You have done more than most men could," she said softly. "Not just in bravery, but in heart. You have protected life, dignity, and honor. That is the greatest reward anyone can give or receive." Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. He realized that the actions he had taken, guided by care and responsibility, had created a lasting impact far greater than he could have imagined. As days turned into weeks, the memory of the bandits' threat faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of daily life. Jack continued his work on the homestead, maintaining fences, tending cattle, and helping Maria with her garden and household chores. Yet the experience remained alive in his mind, a reminder of the strength required to face danger, the intelligence needed to act wisely, and the reward that comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The token Maria had given him rested safely in his cabin, a small but meaningful symbol of gratitude, courage, and the deep bond they shared. Through it all, Jack never sought recognition. He acted quietly, consistently, and with unwavering dedication. Yet the reward, though not sought, came naturally. He experienced a sense of fulfillment, satisfaction, and connection that few could understand. The community's respect, Maria's trust, the knowledge that he had preserved life and dignity were more valuable than any material reward. He had risked his life, acted with courage, and emerged with the satisfaction of knowing he had done what was right. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert plains, Jack rode slowly across the open land. Feeling the wind on his face and the earth beneath him, he reflected on the events of the past weeks, the threat, the confrontation, and the quiet victory that followed. The plains stretched endlessly before him, a vast open space that demanded respect, courage, and care. Jack felt a profound connection to this land, to the people he protected, and to the values that had guided him through life. Courage, honor, and selfless action had shaped his journey, and the reward, though quiet and intangible, was more precious than anything he could have imagined. And as night fell, with stars shimmering across the endless sky, Jack Thompson knew that his life had been enriched by the experience. He had faced danger, protected someone he respected deeply, and acted with integrity, intelligence, and courage.